When I signed the papers for my dream property, a 5-acre slice of semi-wooded land with a modest house on the outskirts of Summit Springs, Colorado, I felt like I'd finally found my sanctuary. After a brutal divorce that cost me my weekend visitation rights and nearly wiped out my savings, I poured everything I had into this place. No mortgage, no HOA, no one telling me what to do. Just me, Jack Anderson, renewable energy consultant and determined landowner, ready to rebuild both my life and my business from the ground up. The real estate agent had been clear. My property was independent. No shared amenities, no neighborhood associations, just county zoning, which was lenient around here. Perfect for my plan to create a self-sustaining homestead and a demonstration site for my work in off-grid energy systems. The perfect fresh start. But I should have known that peace wouldn't come without a fight. I was unloading my tools from my old Ford pickup when a white Lexus SUV glided down my gravel driveway, tires crunching over loose stones. The woman who stepped out had the poised look of someone used to controlling every room she entered. Designer sunglasses perched atop perfectly highlighted hair, an impeccably pressed blouse that looked more suited to a real estate office than a mountain driveway. "Hi there," she called out, striding over with a smile that felt more like a practiced maneuver than a genuine greeting. "I'm Jessica Monroe, president of the Whispering Pines Estates Homeowners Association. We're just over the ridge there." She waved a manicured hand toward the cluster of identical 2-story houses visible beyond my property line. "Jack Anderson," I said, wiping sawdust off my hands before shaking hers. Her grip was firm, her eyes already scanning my half-unloaded tools and stacks of solar panels like she was evaluating a potential eyesore. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she continued, still smiling, but with a tone that suggested she was about to offer a list of expectations. "I thought I'd come by and go over a few things before you get too settled in." I leaned back against my truck, crossing my arms. "I appreciate the welcome, but I think there might be some confusion. My property isn't part of Whispering Pines Estates. I specifically bought this place because it's independent." Her smile tightened, a slight narrowing of the eyes. "Well, technically, the boundaries are a bit fluid. The previous owner had an understanding with us about maintaining certain community standards. Nothing formal, of course, but it helped preserve everyone's property values." I bit back my irritation. "Look, I bought this place because it's free of those restrictions. I plan to renovate the house, set up a renewable energy workshop, and live off the grid. That's why I picked this location." Jessica's eyes flicked toward the solar panels stacked by my truck. "Oh, I see," she said, her tone taking on a slightly condescending edge. "While I admire your, enthusiasm for sustainability, we do have certain aesthetic considerations in our community bylaws. Outbuildings, commercial activities, and unconventional structures can significantly impact nearby property values." I forced a smile. "Well, like I said, my property isn't part of your HOA. I checked all the county records before buying." She gave a light, dismissive laugh. "Records don't always reflect the practical realities of neighboring communities, Mr. Anderson. We have standards here, and I hope you'll reconsider your unconventional plans." With that, she handed me a glossy Whispering Pines brochure before glancing at my half-unloaded truck one last time and striding back to her SUV. As she drove away, I unfolded the brochure, the words "Whispering Pines Estates," a premier living community emblazoned across the top in elegant script. I felt a cold knot of anger form in my chest. This wasn't just a friendly visit. It was a shot across the bow, a warning that I hadn't bought my peace and quiet without a fight. 3 days after Jessica's unannounced visit, I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying the crisp Colorado air and the distant sound of birds calling through the pines, when I saw my neighbor, Tom Dawson, walking his golden retriever along the tree line that separated our properties. He was a tall, sturdy man in his late 60s, his flannel shirt and worn jeans suggesting a life spent outdoors. His dog, Max, bounded ahead, sniffing at every tree and bush like it was his personal duty to catalog every scent. "Morning," Tom called, raising a hand as he approached. "Morning," I replied, leaning back in my old wooden chair, the creak of the weathered wood echoing in the morning air. "Nice day for a walk." Tom stepped onto my gravel path, Max trotting ahead to sniff at my truck tires. He nodded toward the solar panels I'd set up on my side yard, still waiting for installation. Saw Jessica Monroe's Lexus over here the other day, he said, his voice dropping a notch. Let me guess. She came by to welcome you to the neighborhood? I chuckled, but there was a bitter edge to it. Yeah, something like that. Gave me the full pitch about community standards and preserving property values. Made it pretty clear she doesn't like my plans for the place. Tom shook his head, crossing his arms as he leaned against one of the porch posts. That woman's been a thorn in the side of anyone who doesn't fit her vision for this place. She's turned that HOA into her personal fiefdom. You're not the first one she's tried to push around. I leaned forward, curiosity piqued. You've had run-ins with her? Tom sighed, reaching down to scratch Max behind the ears as the dog settled at his feet. Oh, more than a few. When my wife and I first moved in, I wanted to build a larger garage for my old muscle cars. Jessica made it her mission to stop me. Claimed it would ruin the aesthetic of the community and drive down property values. Started showing up unannounced, taking pictures of my place, filing noise complaints if I so much as rev an engine in the driveway. I frowned, feeling the slow burn of anger building again. What happened? She wore us down, Tom said, his voice tinged with regret. We eventually caved. Spent a small fortune on fancy siding and decorative landscaping just to shut her up. She acts like this place is her kingdom, and anyone who doesn't fall in line gets targeted. He gestured toward my panels. Looks like you're the next one on her list. I felt my jaw clench, the tendons in my neck tightening as I considered what Tom was saying. This wasn't just about property values or aesthetics. This was control, pure and simple. Jessica had decided that I didn't fit into her carefully curated world, and she was going to do everything in her power to push me out. Tom straightened, giving Max a gentle tug on his leash as the dog sniffed at my porch steps. Just watch your back, he warned. Jessica and her husband have connections. He's a zoning consultant with the county. They know how to make life difficult for folks who don't play by their rules. I thanked Tom as he turned to leave, his dog trotting faithfully beside him, tongue lolling in the cool mountain air. As I watched him disappear down the trail toward his cabin, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I hadn't come this far, invested every penny I had, just to be bullied into giving up my dream. Later that afternoon, as I was stacking some freshly cut lumber near the side of the house, I saw a white Range Rover parked at the edge of my property. Jessica had returned, this time with her phone in hand, carefully framing shots of my house and yard as if she were a real estate agent cataloging a fixer-upper for a skeptical buyer. I felt my pulse quicken, a mix of anger and disbelief swelling in my chest. She was standing just outside my property line, but the intent was clear. This was surveillance, a thinly veiled threat, a way of saying, I'm watching you. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm as I walked toward the property line. I raised my voice just enough to be heard over the crunch of gravel under her designer boots. Something I can help you with, Jessica? She looked up, her smile too bright, her eyes too sharp. Just documenting the neighborhood, she replied, her tone dripping with faux politeness. Some of our residents are concerned about the changes you're planning. We like to keep things consistent around here. I took a step closer, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rough gravel. You know this is my land, right? Not part of your HOA. You have no say over what I do here. Her smile never faltered, but I saw a flicker of something else in her eyes. Annoyance? Fear? It was hard to tell. Oh, I know, she said, tucking her phone back into her designer handbag. But you never know. Things change. Boundaries shift. Just something to keep in mind. With that, she turned on her heel, her boots crunching on the gravel as she made her way back to her SUV. She paused at the door, looking back at me with a tight, calculating smile. See you around, Jack. I watched her drive away, the taillights of her SUV flashing red as she pulled onto the main road. I stood there for a long moment, the cool mountain breeze rustling the pine branches overhead, the distant call of a hawk echoing through the trees. The first shots had been fired. I just hadn't realized it yet. A week after Tom's warning, I came home to find a bright orange envelope taped to my front door. It flapped in the chilly mountain breeze like a neon flag of hostility. The Lakeview Estates HOA logo was emblazoned at the top, along with the phrase "Final Notice" in bold capital letters. I yanked it off the doorframe, my pulse quickening as I unfolded the letter inside. It was a list of alleged violations against community standards, including unauthorized exterior modifications, visible storage of industrial equipment, and failure to maintain landscaping consistent with neighborhood guidelines. At the bottom was a demand for $1,500 in community improvement fees and a thinly veiled threat that noncompliance could result in further action up to and including property liens. I felt my jaw tighten, the muscles in my neck straining as I read through the list. It was all nonsense. My property wasn't part of their HOA, and I'd been careful to follow every local zoning rule and building code. This was pure intimidation, a clumsy attempt to bully me into submission. I grabbed my phone and called Linda, my attorney friend. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Jack. What's up?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. "I just got a letter from Jessica, Monroe's HOA, demanding I pay a $1,500 improvement fee and threatening a lien on my property." There was a brief pause on the line. "Wait, what? You're not even in their HOA. They have zero authority over your land." "Exactly," I said, pacing the length of my porch. "But they're clearly trying to make my life hell until I give up and sell." Linda's voice sharpened. "This is straight-up harassment, Jack. I'll draft a cease and desist letter for you to send them, and document everything. Every letter, every interaction, every bit of footage from your security cameras. They're trying to wear you down, and the only way to fight that is with a rock-solid paper trail." I thanked her and hung up, my pulse still racing. As I walked back inside, I caught a glimpse of my security monitor. Jessica's white SUV was parked at the end of my driveway again, the headlights cutting through the early evening mist. I clicked over to the live camera feed, zooming in on the vehicle. There she was, standing just outside the property line, snapping pictures of my front yard with her phone. I watched as she slowly panned the camera across my solar panels, my neatly stacked lumber, and a half-finished rainwater collection system I'd started building. I felt my hands clench into fists. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute anymore. This was a targeted campaign, a deliberate attempt to push me out of my own home. I flipped the monitor off and grabbed my jacket. It was time to confront her directly. I jogged down the gravel path, my boots crunching against the stones, and stepped out onto the road just as she turned to get back in her car. "Jessica," I called, my voice echoing off the surrounding trees. She froze, one hand on the door handle, the other still clutching her phone. She turned slowly, her expression shifting from surprise to that familiar, practiced smile. "Oh, Jack, didn't see you there." I crossed my arms, planting myself firmly between her and her SUV. "What the hell is this?" I held up the crumpled orange letter. "You know damn well my property isn't part of your HOA. You have no right to demand fees or threaten liens." She tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "I'm just trying to maintain the character of our community. Your property might technically be outside the HOA, but it still affects our property values. I'm sure you understand that." I took a step closer, my boots crunching against the gravel, and lowered my voice. "You listen to me, Jessica. I'm not some retiree you can push around with fake fines and intimidation tactics. You leave me and my property alone, or I'll make sure every agency in this state knows what you're up to." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something close to fear in her eyes. She straightened, her manicured nails tightening around her phone. "I'm just enforcing community standards, Jack. If you're not willing to work with us, that's your choice, but it will have consequences." I took another step closer, forcing her to take a half step back. "You can shove your community standards, Jessica. This is my land, my home, and I'll do whatever the hell I want with it. Try to mess with me again, and you'll regret it." Her face flushed, and I saw her jaw tighten beneath that polished smile. Without another word, she slid into her SUV and slammed the door, the engine growling to life as she whipped the vehicle around and sped off down the gravel road, a cloud of dust trailing in her wake. I watched her taillights disappear into the fog before turning back to my house, the weight of the confrontation settling on my shoulders. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days that followed my confrontation with Jessica felt like the calm before a storm. I tried to focus on my work, finishing the rainwater collection system and installing a second bank of solar panels on the west side of the property, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Then, a week later, I found out just how far Jessica was willing to go. It started with the power. I just finished wiring my new solar batteries into the main panel when my workshop lights flickered, then went dark. I frowned, double-checking my connections, but everything seemed fine. I jogged back to the house and flipped a few breakers, but the entire system was down. Confused, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security app. The exterior cameras were still active, running off their independent battery packs, and I quickly scrolled through the recent footage. There it was. 2 men in orange vests, working around the base of my utility pole near the road, one of them holding a large pair of bolt cutters. They snipped the main line, and a few seconds later, the lights in my workshop cut out. I felt my blood pressure spike. This was no accident. Someone had cut my power. I grabbed my jacket and stormed down the driveway, my boots crunching against the gravel as I approached the pole. The lock on my utility box had been shattered, the heavy steel door hanging open like a gaping wound. Fresh tire tracks led back toward the main road, the mud still wet from last night's rain. I snapped a few photos with my phone, my hands trembling with anger, then stomped back to the house. As I reached my front porch, I saw a second envelope taped to my door. This one was bright yellow, the Lakeview Estates logo prominently displayed in the corner. I tore it open, the paper crackling in my fist as I unfolded the letter. It was another list of violations, this one claiming I had illegally tapped into the community power grid and was using shared utilities without proper authorization. At the bottom, in bold, underlined print, was a demand for $3,000 in utility fees, along with a threat to escalate the matter to the county if I didn't comply within 72 hours. I let out a string of curses, crumpling the letter into a tight ball and hurling it into the bushes. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I fumbled to pull it out, my fingers still trembling with rage. It was Linda. "Jack, I just got a call from the county inspector's office. Someone filed a complaint against you, claiming you're illegally drawing power from the community grid." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my free hand to my forehead. I just found a letter demanding $3,000 for unauthorized power usage. Someone cut my main line, "Linda, this is sabotage." There was a long pause on the line, and I could almost hear Linda grinding her teeth. "This has crossed the line, Jack. I'm coming over. We need to get this documented immediately and file a formal police report." 30 minutes later, Linda's Subaru pulled into my driveway, her tires kicking up gravel as she came to a hard stop. She climbed out, a legal pad tucked under one arm and a digital camera around her neck. "Show me," she said, her tone all business. I led her to the utility pole, pointing out the cut wires and the shattered lock. She snapped several photos, crouching to examine the tire tracks before following me back to the house. "Did your cameras catch anything?" she asked as we stepped inside, and I quickly pulled up the footage on my laptop. She leaned in close, watching as the 2 men in orange vests snipped the power line, then sped off in a white pickup truck with a Lakeview Estates logo on the side. Linda let out a low whistle. "Well, that's about as blatant as it gets. This is criminal sabotage, Jack. They're not just trying to harass you anymore. They're actively trying to make your life hell." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the length of my kitchen. "I'm not just going to sit here and take this, Linda. I want to hit back, and I want to hit back hard." Linda smiled, a fierce glint in her eye. "Good, because I've been doing some research, and I think we got a solid case for a harassment lawsuit. Not just against Jessica, but against the entire Lakeview Estates HOA. They've crossed too many lines, and it's time someone held them accountable." I felt a surge of hope, the first real spark of optimism I'd felt in weeks. "What do we need to do?" Linda flipped open her legal pad, her pen already moving as she spoke. "First, we gather every bit of evidence we have. Photos, videos, timestamps, every letter and email you've received from them. Then we file a formal complaint with the county and demand a full investigation into their practices. If we can prove they've been falsifying documents, making fraudulent claims, and tampering with your utilities, we can bury them in legal fees and bad press. I nodded, the tension in my shoulders easing slightly. This was what I needed. A plan. A way to fight back. I'll call the sheriff and file the police report, I said, grabbing my phone again. Let's make sure they know this isn't just some neighborhood dispute. This is targeted harassment, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. Linda smirked, flipping to a fresh page in her notebook. And while you're at it, maybe invest in a few more security cameras. If they're willing to cut your power, who knows what they'll try next. As I dialed the sheriff's office, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the kitchen window. My jaw was set, my eyes narrowed with determination. This was my land, my home, and I wasn't going to let a power-hungry HOA bully me into submission. Jessica Monroe had just picked a fight with the wrong man. The following morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. It was Linda. "Jack, you need to get over to the county office." Now, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the chill of the hardwood floor shocking me fully awake. "What's going on?" "I just got a call from a contact in the zoning department. Jessica's filed for an emergency review of your permits. She's claiming your solar array and rainwater collection system are hazardous to the community and violate multiple county codes. If this goes through, they could shut you down before you even have a chance to defend yourself." I felt my pulse quicken, the last remnants of sleep evaporating as adrenaline surged through my veins. How was that even possible? I have every permit, every inspection cleared. She can't just rewrite the rules. Linda sighed, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. "She could try, Jack. That's what she's doing. She's using her husband's connections and her influence in the HOA to push this through. If we don't counter this now, you're looking at massive fines and potentially having to dismantle your entire setup." I threw on a pair of jeans and a flannel shirt, shoving my feet into my work boots as I grabbed my car keys. "All right, I'm on my way. Meet you there." "Already on my way," Linda replied before the line went dead. The drive to the county office felt like a race against time. I could almost picture Jessica sitting in her pristine living room, sipping her morning latte and gloating over my impending legal nightmare. She probably thought I'd roll over like all the other homeowners she'd steamrolled over the years. But not this time. I parked in a county building lot and jogged up the steps, my breath fogging in the crisp morning air. Linda was already waiting in the lobby, her expression grim but determined. "They're holding the review hearing in room 214, she said, gesturing for me to follow her. I pulled the notice Jessica submitted, and it's a mess. She's thrown every possible complaint at the wall, hoping something will stick. We entered the small, windowless conference room to find a group of county officials gathered around a long table, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. At the far end, I recognized David Monroe, Jessica's husband, his expensive suit and perfectly styled hair, making him look more like a politician than a county planning consultant. Jessica herself was seated beside him, her expression one of carefully feigned concern, a stack of neatly organized papers in front of her. She didn't bother to hide her smug smile as Linda and I took our seats across from her. The county planning director, a heavy-set man with a salt and pepper beard, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "All right, let's get started. We're here to review a series of complaints filed by the Lakeview Estates HOA regarding Mr. Jack Thompson's property, specifically the alleged violations of zoning and safety codes related to his solar array and rainwater collection system." Linda leaned forward, her tone sharp and direct. "Before we begin, I'd like to formally request that any and all documents submitted by the HOA for this review be made available to my client for inspection. We have reason to believe these complaints are not only baseless, but also part of a broader pattern of targeted harassment." Jessica's eyes narrowed, but she remained silent, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as the director shuffled through his papers. "Noted," he said, glancing over at David, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "But we still need to address the specific concerns raised in this complaint." David cleared his throat, leaning forward with a carefully rehearsed frown. "The Lakeview Estates HOA has a responsibility to protect the property values and safety of our community. We've received multiple reports from concerned residents about Mr. Thompson's installations. There are serious concerns about electrical hazards, potential water contamination, and aesthetic impacts that could significantly reduce neighboring property values. I felt my fist clench under the table, but Linda placed a calming hand on my forearm, silently reminding me to stay cool. Respectfully, she began, her tone icy, those concerns are entirely unfounded. Mr. Thompson's solar array is fully permitted, inspected, and meets all relevant county and state safety standards. His rainwater collection system is specifically designed to reduce runoff and minimize erosion, precisely the kind of sustainable innovation this county should be encouraging, not penalizing. The director glanced at the documents Linda had spread in front of him, his brow furrowing as he flipped through them. These permits appear to be in order, he said slowly. I don't see any immediate violations here. Jessica leaned forward, her voice dripping with forced concern. But you have to understand, Director Cole, this isn't just about permits. It's about the broader impact on our community's character and property values. Lakeview Estates prides itself on a certain aesthetic, a certain standard, and Mr. Thompson's industrial installations simply don't fit. I felt my jaw tighten, but Linda cut in smoothly. With all due respect, this is a matter of private property rights. My client is not part of the Lakeview Estates HOA and is not subject to their aesthetic guidelines. The HOA has no legal standing to impose their subjective design preferences on his property. Jessica's face flushed, her carefully curated facade beginning to crack. I caught a glimpse of David shooting her a warning glance, but she pressed on, her voice rising. We have a responsibility to protect our investments, to ensure our community remains a desirable place to live. This eyesore is a direct threat to that. Linda leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smirk spreading across her face. And yet, every official inspection has cleared Mr. Thompson's installations as safe, compliant, and environmentally beneficial. It seems to me that this entire complaint is less about safety and more about personal vendettas. The director cleared his throat, his gaze shifting uncomfortably between Linda and Jessica. All right, let's take a step back. I'll need some time to review all this documentation before making a decision. In the meantime, I'm putting a temporary hold on any further enforcement actions against Mr. Thompson's property. We'll reconvene once I've had a chance to fully assess the situation. Jessica's face tightened, her hands clenching into fists as the director adjourned the meeting. As we stood to leave, I caught her glaring at me, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drawn into a furious scowl. You haven't seen the last of this, she hissed as Linda and I walked past. You don't belong here, and I will make sure everyone knows it. I paused, turning to face her, my voice low and steady. You picked the wrong fight, Jessica. I'm not going anywhere, and you're not going to push me out of my own home. As Linda and I stepped out into the crisp morning air, I felt a surge of determination unlike anything I'd experienced in years. This was more than just a property dispute now. It was a battle for my home, my independence, and my right to live on my own terms. And I wasn't about to back down. The weeks following that tense county hearing passed in a blur of paperwork, meetings, and escalating tensions. I'd hoped that putting Jessica and David on notice would slow their campaign against me. But if anything, it seemed to embolden them. They doubled down, leveraging every connection, every whispered accusation, every bureaucratic loophole they could find. But I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I had Linda working overtime on the legal front, pushing for discovery on every piece of evidence Jessica had submitted to the county. We wanted to expose the paper-thin basis of her claims and prove this was a personal vendetta, not a genuine community concern. Meanwhile, I spent my evenings poring over county records, financial disclosures, and HOA meeting minutes, hunting for any crack in their armor. Then, just as I felt I was gaining ground, they hit me with their most aggressive move yet. It started with a surprise visit from 2 county inspectors one morning. They showed up unannounced, clipboards in hand, demanding access to my property. They claimed they had orders to conduct a comprehensive safety inspection based on a series of new complaints filed by the Lakeview Estates HOA. I let them in, knowing I had nothing to hide. But as they moved through my property, taking notes and snapping photos of every solar panel, every water barrel, every inch of wiring, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a routine check. They seemed almost disappointed when they found everything in order, their polite nods and mumbled confirmations doing little to hide their frustration. Later that afternoon, I got the call from Linda. "They're trying to get your property condemned, Jack," she said, her tone grim. "Jessica filed an emergency petition claiming your solar array is an environmental hazard and your water system is leaching contaminants into the groundwater. If the county sides with her, they could force you to dismantle everything and potentially seize your land for remediation." I felt my pulse spike, the blood pounding in my ears. But that's insane. Everything is up to code. I have the permits. I have the inspections. They can't just ignore the facts. Linda hesitated, and I could hear the strain in her voice. "Jack, you need to understand. This isn't about facts anymore. It's about influence, about connections, about who can pull the right strings. Jessica and David are playing a different game now. They're trying to bury you." For a moment, I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me, the crushing realization that I was up against a machine far bigger and more powerful than I'd ever imagined. But then I looked out my window, the afternoon sun glinting off the neatly arranged rows of solar panels, the rainwater barrels gleaming in the soft light, and something hardened inside me. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not giving up. They don't get to win this. Not like this." I hung up, my mind already racing through the next steps. I needed more than just a solid legal defense. I needed a counterattack, something that would hit them where they least expected. That's when I remembered Michael Stevens, the former owner of my property. He'd warned me about Jessica's tactics, about her willingness to bend the truth and push the limits of legality to get what she wanted. I still had his number, and within minutes I was dialing it, hoping he'd pick up. "Jack," he said, his voice cautious. "I was wondering when you'd call again. Let me guess. Jessica's coming after you harder than ever." "Worse," I replied, quickly filling him in on the latest developments. "I need more than just your statement. I need proof, something that shows a pattern, that exposes her for what she really is." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear Michael weighing his options, considering the risks. Then, finally, he sighed. "All right, I still have copies of every letter she sent me, every fake notice, every bogus fine. I even have a recording of one of her courtesy visits where she threatened to have my business licenses revoked if I didn't sell. I'll send you everything I have." It was the break I've been waiting for. Over the next week, Michael's package arrived in bits and pieces. Emails, scanned letters, voicemail recordings. Each one a small piece of the puzzle. Each one adding another layer to the story I was building. I compiled it all into a thick binder, cross-referencing it with my own experiences and the testimonies I'd gathered from other homeowners. Then I took a gamble. I reached out to Melissa Chun, the lifestyle blogger who'd covered my initial run-in with Jessica. She remembered my story and was more than willing to dig deeper, especially once I laid out the full extent of Jessica's campaign. She even agreed to interview the other homeowners I connected with, turning my personal battle into a broader expose on HOA abuses. The piece went live a week later, and it was devastating. Titled "The HOA Queen," how one woman turned a neighborhood into her personal fiefdom. It exposed Jessica's years of bullying, manipulation, and borderline illegal tactics in brutal, unsparing detail. Melissa's article went viral within hours, shared across local news sites and neighborhood forums, drawing hundreds of comments from other frustrated homeowners with similar stories. The backlash was immediate. Local officials, suddenly wary of being associated with Jessica, began distancing themselves. The county planning office that had been so eager to rubber stamp her complaints suddenly grew much more cautious, pulling her emergency petition for review and suspending all enforcement actions against my property. Then came the final blow. A week after Melissa's article went live, I received a formal letter from the state's attorney general's office. They were launching an investigation into Jessica and David Monroe, focusing on allegations of fraud, misuse of government seals, and potential financial improprieties related to their real estate dealings. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across my face. I had won. They had overplayed their hand, and now it was crumbling around them. A month later, I watched from my front porch as a line of county vehicles pulled into the Lakeview Estate's entrance, their flashing lights reflecting off the freshly painted stucco of Jessica's perfect white mansion. I didn't need to see the arrest to know what was happening. It was over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my property, I took a deep breath, the cool evening air filling my lungs. I turned back to my house, the solar panels gleaming in the fading light, the rain barrels full and ready for the next storm, and felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. And as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't help but smile. I'd fought for my home, my independence, my right to live on my own terms, and I had won.